you.
Okay, now we're streaming. Right, are there any apologies or substitutions?
I have an apology from Councillor Salmond.
Thank you. Right then, any declarations of interest?
Yes.
Councillor Miles?
Yes, item 6, as a member of Tayside Contracts, but have dispensation to be allowed in, so there's no problem with that.
Fine, okay. Thank you. Anyone else got declarations of interest? Julie?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Item 11, I'm a member of the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership. I have a specific dispensation for that, so I'll stay and discuss and vote if required.
Okay, anyone else?
Councillor Whiteside as well, Convener.
Right, Councillor Whiteside?
Yes, same as Councillor Miles. I'm a council appointed board member of Tayside Contracts. Right. Report number 30420. I will stay and discuss the report. Thanks.
Anyone else? No more declarations? Okay, let's move on. Minute of the previous meeting. Is that a correct minute?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Right, let's move on to Scottish Fire Service. Item 4B, pages 10 to 32. Gordon, would you like to take this one?
Thank you very much, Convener. Before I ask members to note and comment on the attached paper, if I could ask members to turn to page 17 of their report. This is a performance summary for the last quarter, and it gives us an indication on where we are with our projections against our targets. Here we see from the 12 headline indicators we've identified to focus on, 8 are on target, but 4 are projected to be more than 10% above target by the end of the year. They are headline indicators number 3, accidental dwelling fire non-fatal casualties. Headline indicator number 8, fatal road traffic collision casualties. Headline indicators number 11 and 12, which are deliberate primary and deliberate secondary fires. So with your permission, Convener, I'd like to pass over to Scott Gibson to give some more in-depth information on this report.
Fine, thank you, Gordon. Scott, please.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Gordon, and good afternoon, everyone. If I can turn your attention to page 18 of your report pack, this sets out the key successes and challenges during Q2, which we're asking the committee to note. As per normal arrangements, I'll run through these performance highlights in the following format at each bullet point, and then happy to take any questions relating to any area of the report at the end. So we'll start with bullet point 1 and 2. Overall, we've seen a reduction in the number of accidental dwelling fires during Q2. However, we have seen a slight increase in the number of non-fatal fire casualties. These targets are reduced in line with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Performance Management Framework, and in Angus generally the numbers are low, and there are no trends identified that have got any concern to myself within Angus. The casualties themselves have mostly been from 2 specific incidents. The number of ADFs is dropping in general, and this is having a positive impact on keeping the number of casualties quite low as well. And added to this, the fact that we feel that people and households are a lot better prepared for fires as we come into more modern times with the equipment we've got and the equipment we're fitting. Good working with the partners again through our home fire safety visit programme, which again is adding to this reduction in general numbers. Moving on to bullet point 3, we've experienced zero non-domestic building fires during Q2, which is a first for me. This has been attributed to the impact of the pandemic and the number of business premises during Q2 that were closed, but it's also because of the fire safety management arrangements within these non-domestic properties that are generally of a good standard. Although these numbers are quite low in Angus generally, it is important that we keep on top of them because obviously it has an impact on the business community and productivity within Angus. Referring on to bullet point 4, I've highlighted the below number average RTCs, road traffic collisions, and the related casualties during Q2. The ones that we did have were mainly around the Kirriemuir and Montrose areas, and sadly there was one fatality during Q2 in Montrose. and we had 7 non-fatal casualties as well, which again is below averages. I'd also like in bullet point 4 to put a bit more context around other special services that we're attending under priority 3. In total, we attended 65 special services during quarter 2. Over half of these were effecting entry and assisting other agencies, predominantly where there was concern for the occupier. There were also incidents where we acted as a first responder. We attended flooding, we assisted in animals and rescued people from lifts. And I'll continue to update you on these other special services as we come to scrutiny going forward. Moving on to bullet point 5, I've highlighted that the UFAS incidents again were down during quarter 2. Again, we're attributing this to the impact of COVID and buildings not being occupied during the early part of that quarter. Over the past 3 years, we have been trying to reduce the UFAS unwanted fire alarm signals by 5% year on year. This has proved quite challenging, and we're continuing to put measures in place and trying to work with occupiers of repeat offenders to reduce this. And moving on to bullet point 6, we've highlighted the decrease in deliberate primary fires over the second quarter of this year, along with a slight increase in deliberate secondary fire numbers. Nearly half of the primary fires that we attended were at Rossi Secure Unit, and we are doing some targeted education initiatives following on from this at the young offenders. We continue to do some youth engagement work in the Forfar and Arbroath areas where the majority of the secondary fires are occurring. And with Police Scotland, we've managed to identify some offenders, and we're currently putting them through our Fire Setters initiative. We've also managed to get some education packages onto the school's education online service to assist with this, being that during the current circumstances we've been unable to do very much face-to-face engagement with the youth groups. Finally, referring to bullet points 7 and 8, I'd like the committee to note that although during quarter 2 we have faced difficulties regarding training of our staff, we've managed to ensure that our crews are continually prepared for the role. We've continued to risk assess premises that are high risk remotely, and we're now starting back managing these with face-to-face visits. We've also supported the local resilience partnership throughout the pandemic, offering up our services as required in trying to support the community. And I'd just like to draw your attention finally to some of the great partnership work in Appendix 1 and 2 that's been ongoing within Angus. We did some work around the dirty camping around Lintrathing Loch, and we've done some work again with the local communities in regard to the pandemic that you'll see there. That concludes the overview of the report, and happy to take any questions. Thanks, Convener.
Right, bids for questions. Councillor Whiteside, which page, please? Unmute, Beth. Need to unmute, Beth.
Sorry, my hand was still up from previous. I don't have an item on this this paper.
Councillor Devine.
Page 32.
Okay. Councillor Duff.
18, please, Convener.
Councillor Braze.
Yes, a general question that doesn't have a specific page.
Okay. Councillor Boyd.
Mine will be a comment. Everything's working perfectly well, synchronising here.
Okay. Councillor Bell.
Page 31, please.
Okay, let's start off with Councillor Duff on page 18. I've got them already on there. That's good.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Convener. Just to follow up with the comments that Scott Gibson made about additional, or what I think he called it, special duties, the 65 special duties. You did mention flooding, and I just wondered what percentage of those 65 were flooding. We're all conscious that we've had a number of flooding incidents in our localities in the last few months.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Duff. I had a look into the flooding following pre-agenda, and to look in it, we actually didn't attend very much. We only attended 7 flooding incidents during Q2, so I think the flooding that you may be referring to may come in Q3, around about the 3rd of October. We did attend a further number of flooding incidents after some severe weather right at that, which will be covered in the Q3 scrutiny report.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, you're quite right. I think the ones I was thinking about probably started in August. So yeah, we'll look out for that in the next quarter's report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Bell, page 31.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. I was wanting to pick up on the fires at Lintrathen. I was quite surprised there were only 2, to be honest, because there was a lot of traffic in my inbox on my phone. But I was wondering, to what extent is the fire and rescue service involved on national levels around campaigns for the issues around dirty camping and chopping down trees and setting fire to them, and just general lack of understanding around how to treat the natural environment, because I think there's a big job of work around education to do there.
So I can come in. I can talk briefly about the local initiative we did, and then maybe pass over to Gordon to go a bit further into the national perspective. So locally, what we did was we teamed up with the Scottish Water and the Police Scotland, and we went and carried out some patrolling around the Lintrathen Loch area, where we were obviously aware that there was some dirty camping going on. But when we did attend, there were a couple of groups in attendance, and they had fires, and advice was given. I think for any further sort of to do with the law side of things, that would be over to Police Scotland. But I know we do carry out initiatives throughout the year, predominantly in the summertime, around camping across Scotland. And Gordon, you might have a comment on that further.
Yes, thank you very much. What we have is, to allow us to coordinate a lot of our national activity, we have a prevention and protection function within our service delivery directorate that allows it to coordinate, link in with the national bodies, link in with Scottish Government and other elements. They're able to support us with some material, and as Scott mentioned, we have 4 campaigns that we run quarterly. The summer campaign focuses very much on a number of elements around the outdoor activity, and part of those will link in with the camping activity, safe camping and other elements. So both nationally and locally, we work well, hopefully with partners, just to ensure we identify what the challenges are, what the risks are. And obviously the challenges have been exacerbated this year with the limitations people have on foreign holidays. And it's just the way we work well with partners. Hopefully Scott and the local teams are working well to ensure we address, support and educate our communities to make sure they understand their actions do have a consequence on other members of their community.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the work that you've done there.
Okay, Councillor Devine, page 32.
Yeah, before I address page 32, I just want to thank you so much for the work that was done on Sunday at the fire in Forfar. Both fire and police were on the scene incredibly quickly, and to be able to, I mean, I was really worried about it because it was in such a narrow street. I suppose we have to thank the fact that there was no wind, that some of the other houses didn't get attacked by the fire. But everything was done just so well, I thought. So thank you for saving quite a lot of businesses and quite a lot of houses around that area.
Before you continue, Councillor Devine, I was going to raise the question of the fire in Forfar once they'd completed the report, just to see if there's any update the fire service want to give us. But continue with page 32, please.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to see this partnership activity going on with residents groups. We have quite a few in Forfar, so just wanted to know if there are plans to meet with the other residents groups, and do you see this as a kind of two-way process, you know, feeding back to the group in whatever fashion?
Yes, so the work we've done quite recently with the residents groups was in regard to antisocial behaviour in the area. So throughout the year we've got the community action team who work closely with all the groups, all the partners, and to be honest, that working with the residents groups probably quite a new thing, and I have asked the community action team to try and continue some of this work, so it does give us that inroad into further and what I feel is deeper engagement in the local communities, because it's coming from the front line. So yeah, you will see a lot more of that kind of work and those kind of initiatives going forward in the Angus area. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Gordon.
No, just again, very keen to support these initiatives, working with our partners and also with the communities, which is key, just to make sure we target our activity where it makes the greatest difference for the local communities.
Okay, Councillor Devine.
Yes, thanks. I mean,
Okay.
our communities teams have got all the information that you would need, so that would be great. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Brays, you have a general question?
Yes, thank you, convener. We've spoken before about recruitment to the service in Angus, and I wondered if you could maybe give us a wee update on how that's looking at the moment.
I'll start, if you don't mind, Scott, and I'll let you pick up with the local details. We currently have a national campaign for whole-time recruitment. Our whole-time station in Angus just now is Arbroath. So we are recruiting both throughout the whole of the north and through the whole of the east service delivery, and that will allow local members of the community to apply to join the fire service and work out of Arbroath and other whole-time stations. In addition, we have constant recruitment campaigns going on, working with our retained and volunteer staff, focusing on a number of retained communities within the Angus area. That's areas where we have staff that have primary employment with the fire and rescue service, but respond with pagers. There have been a number of very successful campaigns. Probably the recent one of the last few years has been at Kirriemuir. We've had a significant uptake there, and we will continue to undertake recruitment just to maintain the levels that we require to keep our fire stations as crewed as fully as possible. Scott, are you able to provide some local detail?
Yeah, so I'm happy to report actually within Angus we're in a very healthy position across the board, across all stations. We're only about 1 or 2 personnel down on our establishments. You'll be aware that from previous scrutiny reports that we've recently taken on rural full-time posts holders, and part of their roles and responsibilities is to look at recruitment, because obviously that's one of the biggest priorities within the RDS service, making sure that we get that recruitment right and we're managed to accrue to full establishment so that we can provide that full cover all of the time. So as I said, we are in a very healthy position, but we do have people in post that are actively looking at the retirement profiles and trying to plan ahead to the future so that we can make sure that we do accrue to full establishment all the time. So that's me.
Could I ask, are we making much progress on getting women to come forward to apply?
Yes, so we do carry out a number of positive action campaigns, as we have done over our last whole-time recruitment campaigns, and part of that is trying to get some online platforms where we can promote women and just other underrepresented groups within the communities, where we can upload that and try and encourage people to look at that and case studies, case history on how they're finding it and challenges that they've found, and we are putting a lot of work into that. Again, a lot of the time you can take a horse to water, but it's very much getting these people to come along and be involved and trying to encourage them to partake and take a job within the fire and rescue service. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Gordon, from your perspective.
Yes, more than happy to come in. We have a nationally coordinated campaign driving positive action throughout the national service. I'm the North lead as part of one of my responsibilities, and we get good support from the national campaigns, where we have, over previous whole-time campaigns, you've been able to run face-to-face recruitment campaigns. Unfortunately for this one, it's been very much formatted around the electronic formats, which has been new to us. However, it will continue to work, and we will continue to try to work towards getting a employment profile that matches our community profile.
And I think, just to finalise that, I would always encourage members to, when you're out in the communities, please promote the fire and rescue service as an opportunity and as a career, and try and encourage more representation for the underrepresented groups. That would be appreciated.
Okay, Councillor Brace.
Yes, I think the lack of public events for the fire service to attend has probably been a bit of a blow this year, and I hope that can get going again in due course. But yes, thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Boyd, do you have a comment?
Yes, Councillor Brace did beat me to it slightly, because I was going to be mentioning the recruitment, as I had mentioned in the last quarter. So well done for moving things forward. Not easy as we came out of lockdown to be able to do any of these public events or whatever, you know. So, but it's good to see that you're taking on board Councillor Brace's comments and now mine on that. And as I've mentioned to you before, Scott, you contacted me minutes after the last Scrutiny and Audit meeting, and I just want to give that service or that option to say, if you want me to try and facilitate a meeting with the Carnoustie Golf Links, which is Carnoustie's largest employer, that is an ideal situation. The Links is very close to the local fire station in Carnoustie, and these guys are ideal, I would think, to be able to, in case of an emergency, be able to dash up to Links Avenue. It's even called Links Avenue, so that's how close it is to the Links, and try and get some recruitment from the 120 people that are working down there at present. So that offer is still there, Scott. And finally, just the other one, I know it'll come in the third quarter, but on a local basis, I'll be watching with interest the willful fire raising that happened with the hay bales in between Carnoustie and East Haven around about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it'll be interesting to see whether that was willful or what was going on with that. I know there are reports going on with your good selves and the police on that one, but it'll be interesting to see that in the next quarter's review. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Boyd.
Right, it's not actually on the quarterly report, but it's highly topical, having been in the press for the past 2 days. Is there anything either of you want to share with us on the incident in Forfar on Sunday, just to maybe bring us up to date or advise us of what your feelings on the matter are?
I think from me, I'll hand over to Gordon, who was actually on duty on Sunday. I went down yesterday morning to see the crews who revisited the site, just to douse some hotspots, etc. But the feedback from the managers that were in attendance at the incident, it was exceptional work to stop it. There was, I know somebody had said there was no wind, but there was a little bit of wind, and it could have quite easily spread the way it was blowing to some residential properties, in particular at the incident ground. So just to say well done to those crews and the police colleagues that did attend and managed to get there very quickly and get on top of it very quickly. I don't know, Gordon, if you were obviously monitoring the incident and have maybe had something since.
Yes, thank you. No, I was on duty at the weekend. I was the duty third call officer for the North of Scotland. I attended the incident, and again, really just to offer my compliments to the crews from Forfar and others that were there at the first attendance. They did a fantastic job. What was a significant fire, they managed to prevent it spreading to any of the neighbouring buildings. By the time I attended, they had it well under control to prevent it going out with the footprint of the building. And I know the work went on for a number of hours throughout the afternoon and evening, but they brought it under control with the minimal of impact. I know there was some impact to the city centre, but hopefully we've kept that very much to short-term impact to allow establishments to open up and progress.
Okay, thank you very much, both. I think just pass on the committee's thanks and congratulations to the crew for the way that they handled the incident and the way they contained the incident. We'll no doubt see a further report in next quarters, or maybe in next quarter, I would imagine, statistics.
Yeah.
Right, that concludes 4A. Councillor Boyd, would you like to put your hand down? The next one is 4A, which is the local fire and rescue plan for Angus. I think we've seen this before, but Gordon, would you like to say anything on this?
Before I hand over to Scott to give a quick overview, I'd just like to thank members and hope they're able to approve this draft of the local fire plan and note the comments. So if I can pass over to Scott to give a quick overview.
Okay, thanks again, Gordon. Yeah, so just a very short overview of the plan. As the convener said, this has been out for consultation for a number of months now. So it came following the review of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service strategic plan. From that, each LSO area carried out a review of the local plan. This is contained within Appendix 2 of your pack of 4A, and this took account of historical data from the previous 5 years and also stakeholder feedback that was provided through online surveys earlier this year. So this is formed in the Angus local fire plan, and again, as Gordon says, we're just looking for agreement from the committee. The priorities remain the same for Angus, with the emphasis being on improving community outcomes through our strong partnership working. We aim to continually improve as a service through the challenging times of increased demand for public services, through the change in risk profiles that we're seeing growing in recent years, and from more recently the pandemic that we're currently all going through. The final plan from that has been submitted for note, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments from the plan.
Okay. Right, bids for questions on the plan 4B. Nobody want to ask any questions? Anybody want to make a comment? Nobody wants to make a comment. In that case, do we agree to accept this fire plan? Agreed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, in that case, let's move on to item 5A, the police report, starting on page 63. And can I ask Chief Superintendent Andrew Todd to start this one off?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll not read through the entirety of the report. You have it before you. I would just draw members' attention to it's a Q2 report, so it covers the year to date, the end of Q2. Clearly, that is impacted significantly by the COVID restrictions, and they will have impacted the crime figures and some of the detection rates. And also within the report, members will note at the end that we've included some data around some of our COVID activity that we've been undertaking over the period, because I know that will be of interest to members. But throughout the report, I would just draw members' attention again to our priorities and where they link into the Angus Community Plan. This is a further demonstration of our continued support towards the outcomes within the Angus community. So happy, Chair, to take any questions at all on the report. Thanks.
Okay, item 5A, bids for questions. Councillor Bell. Page.
Thank you, convener. I've got a few pages. Do you want me to just reel them off? 70, 82, 83, 88, 96 and 97. Sorry.
88, 96 and 97. Okay, anyone else? Councillor Devine?
Just 79 and 104.
Okay, Councillor Duff?
Page 87, convener.
Thank you. And Councillor Braze?
Page 104.
104. Right. Okay, then we'll start off with Councillor Bell on page 70.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the update. I wanted to pick up again on the beauty spots issue, and thank you for responding to what I suspect were quite a few calls from my ward around the dirty camping issue, and I appreciate that the 4E's approach it probably worked in those situations. It was quite a light touch. I just wonder to what extent your approach around the COVID restrictions are becoming necessarily a bit more assertive as we're going into winter now, and there are so many winter issues as well as COVID that we're needing to deal with. Have you sensed a change in tone on a national basis across the service?
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Locally within the Tayside area and specifically within the Angus area, we are acutely aware of the 4 E's does include enforcement, and we are moving to enforcement where it's relevant to do so. I think that the challenge of responding to your question at the end there about how have we sensed a change is that there's clearly a change in the actual rules and regulations. They are more complex. And what we are finding is that whilst we have seen breaches of the regulations, sometimes they are purely as a consequence of people actually not understanding the complexity of the rules as they apply. But equally, we do see occasions where people are just determined not to follow the rules, and that's where we will move to the 4th E more quickly than we might perhaps have done at an earlier stage. So we recognise that need, and we're not shying away from enforcement. My only caveat is that it's a public health emergency, and we have a role to perform as partners in that as a police service. But seeking to enforce compliance just through ticketing people probably isn't likely to be a very sustainable solution. So we look to the wider community to continue that compliance. And where they don't, as I say, you'll often find that engagement, encouragement, education actually is all that's required, and then we do get compliance going forward. But as I say, we are moving to enforcement where necessary.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Councillor Devine, page 79.
Yes, I was just wanting to pick up on the stop and search bit because the stats there are really interesting. I mean, 188 stops with 80 well, I suppose positive things with weapons and drugs being found. You're obviously working on intelligence there. How can I just ask how much resistance you encounter when you do this? And also, is there a particular demographic involved?
So the stop search, Councillor, thank you, is highly scrutinised both by Wayne locally, and I'll ask him to come in a minute just to speak about some of the local challenges that may present, but also nationally. And as you'll know, Scottish Government and SPA still provide a significant amount of scrutiny over this area of business. We also provide a significant amount of information into the public domain around the stop search material, which I'm looking to try and build into a more coherent entry for yourselves, because the documents that's published online are literally hundreds and hundreds of pages long, and I really don't think anybody wants to read that. So we are looking at that. I'm hopeful to try and get something in by Q3, if not certainly by Q4, which I think is of relevance for members to know. That said, going forward, yes, you're correct in that there's an element of intelligence, but there's also an element of professionalism. The officers know their people, they know their communities, they know their issues, and they will target what their professional judgment tells them they need to target. And I would suggest, and I think as rightly as you called out yourself, over 40% detection rate of success tells you that the officers are targeting the right thing. It is only one tactic that we employ within the range of tactics available to us. So I don't want to overemphasize the use of stop search. 188 interactions with the public in 6 months is not a lot. But clearly it's the right people that we are stopping and searching using the powers that have been given to us. So I'll perhaps just ask Wayne to come in and talk about any of the local challenges around any sort of pushback by members that are being searched. So Wayne, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing was obviously when we looked at this a couple of years ago in Police Scotland, all the officers were retrained, and it was impressed upon them the importance of knowing their powers and where they stand and how they treat people when they search. So yeah, there'll be some resistance from some members of the public when they're getting searched. That's normally because they're hiding something and they know they're going to be charged. We scrutinise the search all the time, and again, it's just encouraging the officers to get to know the members of the public in certain areas where they know they're likely to obviously get a positive search, and be very, very mindful of their powers and do things properly. So we don't have really any issues highlighted to me about people saying I was searched unlawfully or illegally. And I've not really had any complaints neither about the way the officers are dealing with that. So I think we've actually got it spot on just now, the way we're treating people, how we're explaining the search to them, and obviously the recovery rate is very good, so we are doing things right.
Okay.
Just wondered about the demographic. Is there a trend there?
There's no trend of demographic that gives me any cause for concern whatsoever.
Okay. Right. Councillor Bell, page 82.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to commend the work of the partnership on the Scam Free Angus campaign, and really would encourage people to step forward if they feel they've been scammed. And I know there have been 51 crimes recorded. Do we know how much money that involves across those crimes? And to what extent has money been able to be returned to the victims of those crimes? It's really just the most venal crime, targeting our, most vulnerable people quite often.
No, thank you, Councillor. And you're right, there's a lot of vulnerability involved in this, and it does impact on people's confidence going forward if they find that they've been defrauded from what they thought was a legitimate transaction. There's also a need for us to continue to help educate people who maybe aren't as vulnerable, but they see an opportunity that perhaps is too good to be true, and they end up being defrauded as a consequence of that. I don't have a figure of the overall amount, but I would caution the value of that because it will be a developing figure. However, one person's £10 is another person's £100, so it's the impact upon the victims is the really important element for us. But we can certainly take away an action to bring back a figure to committee so they know what sort of sum of money. But as I say, I would caution against necessarily reading too much into it. There's been some eye-watering sums of money lost over the years by people, and actually some of the smaller sums actually the greater impact as it impacts upon people's confidence to then engage with that wider society. Our focus is twofold in this space. We need to continue that education. We need to continue to, the phrase we might use is to target harden our potential victims, stop them becoming victims, doing whatever we can, working with partners, as well as our own sort of publicity and visiting and such like. And then the second element is actually pursuing those that commit these offences. However, there's a limit to what we can do as a division, given that a number of these offenders are actually located abroad in a whole magnitude of countries around the world where we have absolutely no jurisdiction. Police Scotland clearly does a lot of work internationally, so it comes from the division into the wider organisational support for us there. So we do pursue people regardless of whether or not they're out of the country, but there's a practicality from a divisional perspective that our resource is better served preventing people becoming victims than pursuing those who make them victims.
Okay.
Thank you.
Page 83, Councillor Bell.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I wanted to pick up again on the shoplifting issue, and I was sorry to see that people are using public health actions to cover their behaviour. But before lockdown, we were concerned around the rise in shoplifting around food and maybe clothing and austerity. But I know there has been a lot of additional support put in for food over the pandemic. And I wondered if there was a particular trend around the increase going on here, and how many of the people stopped for shoplifting had been charged, or perhaps signposted to additional support, alternatives to the criminal justice system, please.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'm not going to speculate on motivation for individuals to commit criminality. I don't think that would be a helpful position for Divisional Commander to provide that speculation. It is quite clear where we catch somebody for shoplifting, we will report them. But that's a flippant phrase, because actually behind that, we still look at the vulnerability of everybody. And if there's a vulnerability that individual presents to us, then we record that. We assess it against a test, against a set number of points. And if it meets that criteria, we will then refer that information into partners, most likely within social work, health, social care partnership, and that then would trigger, regardless of whether or not they're a victim of a crime or a subject of or a suspect in a crime, they're still entitled to that level of protection and support. So we would put that through our adult or child protection arrangements if that was appropriate, to make sure that the correct support goes into that family or into that individual if that's how they present. And that could be anything from substance misuse to a housing problem to a financial problem to any number of different reasons. So we don't deal with people in isolation and deal with them only as a shoplifting, but equally, if they've committed a crime, we will report them for it. And as I said at the start, I'm not going to speculate on people's motivations for committing criminality.
Okay. Councillor Duff, page 87.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I had a couple of questions on page 87, really on road safety. At the beginning of the page, you mentioned the tragic fatal accident just close to Montrose, and I'm sure you won't want to discuss the details. I really just wanted to pick up one thing in the report where you said it was an insecure load. It was really a general question. Is that now an unusual sort of road accident, or is insecure loads still an issue? So that was one question I had. The second question really is further down when you mentioned in July 2020 a motorcycle campaign. And I've previously raised, a few years ago, we had a very high number of fatal motorcycle accidents in Angus. Really just to give us an update as to what happened this year in terms of training on motorcyclists.
Thank you. I'll ask Wayne, if possible, to cover the specific detail of the motorcycle campaign in July 2020. In regards to the fatal road accident, thank you. No, we won't be going into any specific detail around that. Insecure loads in general aren't a specific problem for us. A lot of work is done by our roads policing colleagues at loads, both the type of load that's being carried as well as whether or not that load is secure. So a lot of the dangerous loads that are moved around the country have to be done under certain specific circumstances. So our roads policing officers do spend quite a lot of time dealing with that, and to be fair, the trade are very heavily regulated, and so it's not a specific issue for us. But clearly, there's an element there, as highlighted in the report, that may have impacted in this accident, and that is absolutely tragic. And we'll continue to keep a focus on that area of business. In general terms, our KSIs, our killed and seriously injured over a number of years, have continued to go down, but motorcycles are a vulnerable user group, or road user group, and they do deserve and get a specific degree of attention. So, and obviously in July we had a motorcycle campaign, but I'll maybe just ask Wayne to touch on what that was during this unique period of time.
Yeah, basically I think the campaigns every year targeting the summer months, obviously when the motorcyclists get their bikes out, and some of the roads in Angus are deemed as preferential routes just because of the scenery and the type of roads they are. So enforcement is probably, again, it was the last type of thing. It's getting out there, educating the motorcyclists, trying to get them to slow down, showing them the pitfalls of driving, etc., etc. And, well, we look at the fatalities. There's been no fatalities in this recorded period, so it seems to be successful. I could get more information from the council, from our road policing unit, who actually ran the campaign, if that's required.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, and particularly how you recruit people into these training campaigns.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bell, page 88.
Yes, thank you. Just let me get my wee bit of paper. Yeah, on the speeding, I think we all get issues around speeding and poor driver behaviour around our wards, and I certainly seem to be busier on that front over lockdown. So thank you for responding to those issues through the Road Safety Coordination Group. I wondered to what extent any of the people who were stopped for speeding were repeat offenders, if you like. Are you genuinely finding that people are desisting from speeding once they've been stopped?
No, thank you, Councillor. I mean, ultimately, no, they don't, because you do total up points. If it's at a certain amount, you provide with points for your licence, and once you have so many, you lose your licence. We know that happens. And because we report people to Crown rather than give them the final set of points to lose their licence, because it's a matter for the courts. take people's licences off them. And so we do know that we get repeat road users. But what I would say, and this just comes from near 30 years of policing experience, is that the people who speed in one village usually live in the next village and complain about the folks speeding through their village. That these are the people, in general terms, that live and work within these communities are speeding through the community next to them. And it's for everybody. It's not somebody else that's speeding. Everybody does it to one extent or another, either inadvertently or quite deliberately, and not at various moments in time. So I think it's important that everybody continues to monitor their speed, watch their speed, and be respectful of the communities that they pass through. Because we are there, we are charging people. We do have lots of equipment that we use as well. A lot of Wayne's officers are qualified to use the equipment required within the built-up areas to deal with speeders. And whilst our intention is to slow people down, if we catch them speeding, they will be reported and have points added to their licence. As I say, and if you tot up enough of those, it's only 4 occasions, I believe, and then you lose your licence. And if it's an excessive speed, then you would be reported straight away for a dangerous driving offence rather than a speeding offence, which would carry a ban as well. So it's genuinely important stuff. But going back to Wayne's point about the killed and seriously injured road accidents, ultimately that's our objective here, is to reduce the risk of injury and death on the road. And we are doing that, so we are making success in that space.
Okay. Okay, Chancellor Bell again, page 96.
Okay, do you mind if I wrap 96 and 97 together? Great. Okay, so first of all, I want thanks for adding in the hate crimes figures. I would love at some point to see a breakdown of whether these are racially connected hate crimes or around gender or disability. If that's possible at some stage, I think it would be helpful to see that. And also around the domestic abuse issues, obviously an area of interest. What are sorry, I'm getting mixed up there with my notes. I think we're still going to find some issues coming out in the wash, which is very concerning. And moving on to the sexual crimes element on page 97, I find it so distressing that children are 50% of the victims of sexual abuse. And in 21st century, I think that's just shaming for our society. How well is the Safe and Together process working to support children and families who have been affected by that? I don't hear much about it, except for when I ask. So I would find it helpful to have more of that from the police perspective, if that is possible. Great to hear what you can give me on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Quite a lot in there. So the breakdown of hate crime, we'll take that away and see if we can break it down by protected characteristic and see if that helps provide any further ability for scrutiny. So if we'll take that as an action, please. In regards to the domestics and your comment that there might still be a lot to come out in the wash, we absolutely, not just ourselves but others involved in the adult protection arena, absolutely saw that potential of the seldom seen groups becoming even less seen during lockdown period. We made sure that we maintained our entirety of our capability and capacity in that space. So I diverted a fairly significant amount of resource into more high profile areas in order to maintain our service, particularly during the early part of lockdown. Not that I left those exactly where they were because of the risk that's presented within that area. We obviously did quite a lot of local campaigning. We were very visible around that space, so when reports were received, we were seen to be acting upon it, to give confidence to victims that if you report it, we will be there for you with partners. Our colleagues in C3 put in unique arrangements where there was more availability to make telephone calls in, not necessarily by voice. So a lot of our victims were reached out to. So I am content that we did everything we possibly could in that space to maintain the visibility and a reactive ability to increase the confidence of partners. victims, and obviously we then continue to work with our partners to make sure that we were coherent. Our Chief Officer Group structure, which I obviously sit on with your Chief Executive, we've been monitoring this on a monthly basis, looking at the figures and making sure that we weren't having a hidden problem building in the background. That's not to say that there isn't more to come out. We recognise the severity of the crime, the volume of the crime, and it does cause me a concern I share with you, but I would just like to offer some reassurance that we haven't left this space to go back to it. We've been in there constantly throughout this period. In regards to the children victims of sexual crime, I share your concern and absolutely share your comments around that in a 21st century society. I would only caution to the committee that you've assumed victims' age in this, I suspect, and it's not always the case that two children who are involved in a certain activity, one of them's a subject and the other is one of them's a victim, the other one's a suspect. But we won't. Yeah. So it's still impactful on everybody involved, and children are treated as all of them are treated as victims of a situation, regardless of the actions that they've taken. So we recognise the amount of work we need to do there with others around education, around particularly in the online space, about how to protect themselves online, what's appropriate behaviour and such like. Clearly, our child protection arrangements, which are statutorily stood up, and again reporting into Chief Officer Groups, are really, really critical. We pour over every one of these incidents with partners to see what do we understand what we're dealing with, because it's not necessarily just the crime that's been reported, and there might be other vulnerabilities that we're not cited on. What's the support that's going in, both now as well as in the future? Because if we're going to take that person down a criminal justice route, then what's the impact of that on their adverse childhood experience going forward? So there's a huge amount of work, and generally speaking, unless it's the most simple of incidents, generally speaking, these are all led by our specialist departments within the CID and public protection units, who are co-located, certainly with Angus, with colleagues in the local authority as well, particularly the social work. I don't know if that gives reassurance to Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Can we move to page 104, Councillor Devine?
Thanks, Convener. This is a really quite a short question, I think. It's on 104, and it's phase 1 of CITES, the illegal trade of endangered species. I noted that action was going to be taking place in October and November. So I was wondering if there is now an update on this, and just to see if this is much of a problem in Angus.
We don't have an update as yet. We'll still be collating that, but I'll commit to ensuring that we comment on that within the next quarterly period. Is it a problem specifically in Angus? Possibly. That's the purpose of the inquiry. Is it a problem internationally? 100% it is. We know that there's a problem with the CITES regulations, and certainly we know that politically it presents some challenges, and we've saw recent coverage within the Scottish Government around intentions going forward for some of our upland and rural areas, and some of the sporting pursuits being followed. So we know we have some challenges in this space, but the numbers will be low, but the impact's very, very high because of the uniqueness of these animals. So if you allow us, we'll report back at the end of Q3.
I knew the councillors would be a bit interested in this, boss, so I spoke to Blair just before we came online. Phase 1 actually ended at the end of November there, where we done some work around antique shops and some of the sales places looking for ivory, tortoise shell, and the Chief Superintendent's completely right. There was few and far between where we found any offences. It was mostly an education type thing. 1st of December we moved to the badger type persecution, and there'll be an operational order coming out from Police Scotland on the work we're going to do on that. But reassured, all the stuff we done in Angus, we probably found 2 or 3 things that were borderline, nothing overwhelming during that phase.
Councillor Brace, you have a question on page 104 as well?
Yes, thank you, Convener. I'm aware of some fairly high-profile police activity concerning hare coursing over recent times, and I was just wondered if you could maybe give us a wee bit of an update on that and on hare coursing in general. Thanks.
Wayne, I'll ask you just to respond to that one, please, because I know that you're well cited on that.
Yeah, the hair coursing it still remains a problem. We've arrested a number of individuals took their vehicles over the last couple of months, but it still continues. Gathering evidence is always a problem, but the people that are starting to report it now are getting better. They're filming people, they're taking vehicle registration numbers, and because we have the rural inspector for Tayside sitting in Angus, we're seeing how we can bring cases together using corroboration from different incidents to identify people. I think recently we took 2 vehicles and 2 dogs just a couple of weeks ago, and it's always at the forefront. When I see it, I know everyone has an interest in it, but it's just getting the right evidence and giving the officers the confidence to deal with that, because they see it as quite a difficult thing to evidence, but we're getting better. And as I say, there's been a couple of arrests and vehicles taken in the last couple of months.
Okay.
Yes, that's very encouraging. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Boyd, you didn't give a page number, so I presume you want to make a comment?
Oh yes, I'd like to make a comment. Thanks, Alec. It was back to what other councillors have been saying. It was interesting. It's comforting to hear Andrew Todd saying that he has no concern over the demographics of police crimes going on throughout Angus. But you wouldn't have think this if you were watching social media in Carnoustie, where we seem to have, or also it would be, you would think that there's lots of break-ins going on, and this has been happening over the last week or so, and I'm wondering, I'm sure the local police officers will come back and let us know that that's not going on. But the reason why I'm bringing it forward is that from the years ago when I used to be on the local crime prevention panel, there was the crime and the fear of crime. And these were 2 different things, but the fear, and I worry that so many people, especially when we're in this lockdown and people can't get out and about, they're spending more time seeing things on computers and are maybe getting the wrong messages sent to them via the social media. So, you know, all I'm saying is, look, like I did with the fire service, if there's anything I can help try and alleviate these problems and get the community council involved, because we do get excellent reports from that, and if there's something from that we can then fill back to the communities that there isn't anything to worry about, I would certainly be able to help as best I can on that.
Okay, is that everything on item 5A? Can we move on to contact assessment and model 5B, pages 109 to 112?
If you may, Chair, I'll just ask Wayne to cover that one, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously there was a paper attached, so I'll just briefly summarise the contact assessment model. It's been used in the west and east of Scotland since probably the beginning of the year, and we actually moved it into Tayside when the first lockdown restrictions came in place. Because of the way we were managing calls, there was a presumption of non-attendance for a number of calls. It's not really that different, it's just a way that we're going to manage 101 and 999 calls. We're looking basically to identify vulnerability and therefore use a more effective prioritisation of the police resources. So when calls are taken, now specially trained officers are now making an assessment of the call, and that's based on the threat, risk, harm and vulnerability. On the back of that, they'll decide whether the calls will be put out as we've changed the grading of calls as well. It used to be 1 to 5, with 1 obviously the most urgent. We've now changed our calls to immediate, prompt, which requires a police officer to be there within 4 hours, scheduled and non-attendance. Now the contact assessment model, or CAM as we'll call it, that specifically deals with schedule and non-attendance calls. We have teams of officers now called resolution teams that have been set up, as I say, they were set up in Tayside during COVID. We've now moved the north of Scotland CAM team to Inverness, and that started operating on the 29th of September. Resolution teams will take your scheduled and your non-attendance calls, and they can actually either record crimes directly by telephone or video calls, neglecting the need for a police officer to attend. They can create appointments for local officers. So in Angus, we set 48 appointments slots for the week, where complainers can book an appointment and a police officer will go along to see them and get their complaint. Helpful to us is signposting to more suitable agencies. So if somebody's phoned the police, and the police officers can redirect them to another agency that will deal with their problem, it will save an officer attending and reduce the demand. And sometimes it's just a case of providing advice and guidance to the public over the phone, again, negating the need for an officer to attend. At this stage, because of COVID-19, have we been successful? Yes, I would say we have. I mean, just now we've got some information where on average we were probably averaging about 346 incidents a day in Tayside. The breakdown for that is we probably had officers attending 229 calls, and the resolution team were managing 117. So reducing the demand at that peak period by about 34%, which I would deem as a success. There's still some teething, like everything else. Once we get into the way of it, we'll get better at. I'll not say it's the be-all and end-all just now, but it certainly helped during the COVID period, and I can see it helping in the future. That's probably about it. As I say, the paper's there if anybody else has any questions.
Right, Councillor Boyd, could you take your hand down from the last time round? Councillor Bell.
Thank you. A general question.
Okay, anybody got anything specific? Councillor Miles?
A general question too.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything specific? Nothing specific. Councillor Bell, please.
Thank you. Before I ask my question, I was involved in setting up NHS 24, so I'm coming from a place of empathy. I do know, people struggle to come to terms with change, but what mechanisms do you have in place to monitor performance and the quality of the triage and customer feedback? Do you have a dashboards program? Anything you can give me?
Thank you, Councillor. We, within our Contact Command and Control Division who monitor this, there's a significant amount of scrutiny and oversight by the SPA into this area of business. There's been quite a significant shift of resource in here as well to bring this journey to a conclusion in the north, following it rolling out in the west and east over the last few years. So there is a high degree of governance. In regards to the actual day-to-day quality assurance, we are subject occasionally to complaints about the police service, particularly quality assurance complaints where people just aren't happy at their level of service, and absolutely they're entitled to raise that. You'll know from recent coverage that Dame Eilish Angelini has produced quite a seismic report for us, which includes in part some of that detail. So we are looking over that as an organisation just now, and ultimately government and ministers will likely decide what we are going to do as an organisation, and that will include how we deal with the public confidence that you can draw from complaints about the police and the service that people receive. But moving just into that public confidence sphere, we are also this year have built a much more coherent approach to measuring our public confidence. It's not something we've done particularly well in Police Scotland, not for the lack of trying, and we now have a fresh approach which appears to be working much better. We've got more information that's now coming into us that allows us to understand what the public confidence and user satisfaction is actually telling us. It's not quite ready for inclusion into scrutiny papers because we haven't quite quality assured it yet, but I'm working nationally as trying to be a pilot division to bring that to scrutiny so that I can demonstrate to scrutiny what the public confidence and user satisfaction is telling us for your area, as well as what the complaints about the police are saying. So what type of complaints, what sort of volume of complaints that we're getting. The latter is going to be very difficult in the way, because of the way in which Police Scotland is structured, because you want to know about the complaints about service within Angus, not the complaints about Wayne's officers, and they are two different things. And that's what I'm trying to just unpick just now. So if members can bear with us, again, I'm trying to aim for Q3. It might be Q4 before it arrives, but I'm absolutely committed to bringing public confidence and user satisfaction to the committee, supported by complaints data that gives you something more to assess the public confidence in the service that we're providing, not just in the 101 999 sphere, but in all of our activity.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Councillor Miles?
Yes. Do you record and monitor the time taken to answer especially 101 calls? Because I'm getting a lot of complaints that there's a long time before the 101 calls get answered. 999 calls seem to be answered quite quickly, but 101 is taking a long time. Do you have figures
Yes.
on?
I don't have figures for the Angus area. Our C3 division do monitor that and report that back nationally. Calls 101 and 999s are taken in another part of the country, so very difficult for them to separate out which part of the country they receive the calls from. It's more the performance of that individual area. They monitor that very closely and they react to it. So we knew that at the start of the lockdown period, some of the calls were going up as resources went down, and they responded to that by putting more resource in place. So Chief Constable, I know personally, looks at these figures on a regular basis, and clearly they're reported through SPA as well. So yeah, very closely monitored area of business.
What is the recommended time taken to answer these calls?
I don't know, it's not my area of specialism. I'll need to come back to you on that one, Councillor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, there's nothing else on 5B. Do we agree it? Agreed. Thank you.
Agreed.
Right, in that case, we can excuse the police and the fire service from the meeting while we get on with the rest of the what's internal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, item 6, pages 113 to 154, Tayside Contracts Annual Performance Report. Mark Armstrong, you were going to introduce this.
Thank you very much, Convener, and thank you, Committee. And I'd just like to welcome this report to Scrutiny and Audit, the presentation of the annual performance report by Tayside Contracts. So we have with us today at the meeting Keith McNamara, the General Manager for Tayside Contracts, Dougie Mackay, and Frank Riley, part of Keith's senior team. As Committee will note, the performance report covers the period 2019 to 2020. Keith has been in post for just over a month. I think this is the anniversary of his month today. So really it covers a period that obviously predates Keith's position in post. But before Keith and his team present the report and take any questions, Keith just wanted to say a few words and I think possibly show a couple of slides in terms of Tayside Contracts and the direction in which they're moving with regards to their performance and their activity for the 3 councils across Tayside. So I'll hand over to Keith to start with. Thank you.
Right, Keith, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Convener. Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for that introduction, Mark. Yes, indeed, this is day 21 of my tenure as Managing Director of Tayside Contracts. And as Mark highlighted, I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues Frank Riley and Dougie Mackay, our 2 heads of operations and human resources and facilities, to support me in presenting a few slides just about our thoughts and also our annual performance report. I understand this is the first time that Tayside Contracts has had the opportunity to present our annual performance report to your committee. I'm delighted to do so today and hope it's the first of many occasions to share our successes, but also to learn from what we can do better and how we can work better together. As Mark highlighted, Convener, we have a short presentation and we'd welcome any questions subsequent to the presentation. It's effectively in 2 parts. I'm going to ask Dougie to give you some background information just on Tayside Contracts, because I'm conscious that not everybody on today's committee is as au fait as Councillor Miles as in terms of what Tayside Contracts does. Some commentary on our annual performance report, and then I'll follow up from Dougie with just something about our future vision and how we see Tayside Contracts going forward, just to share my thoughts as an incoming Managing Director of Tayside Contracts. So I hope that's okay with yourself, Convener.
Carry on, please.
Thank you. Over to yourself, Dougie, to talk us through the first couple of slides. I thought Dougie was there.
I thought I saw him as well. Is he still mute?
Sorry, Keith. Yeah, just getting used to the Zoom links rather than my Teams. Apologies. Yep, so I'm Dougie Mackay. I'm Head of Operations, look after or oversee the construction division. Unlike Keith, I'm more than 20 days in. I've been with Tayside Contracts for 17 years in various positions within the organisation. So just very briefly, for those of you who may not be fully aware of what Tayside Contracts is as a setup, we've been in existence since 1996, so 24 years on the go. We operate under a joint committee represented by elected members from Angus Council, Dundee City Council and Perth and Kinross Council. Just recently this year, our employee numbers have increased significantly due to a response to COVID, although that's temporary employees. So we currently employ 3,132 employees on a mixture of full-time, part-time and temporary contracts. In 2019-20, our turnover was 76 million. That was slightly down on the previous year. A couple of key points. We carry out not just works for the three councils that they've made reference to, we also carry out works for other councils across Scotland and within in the private sector as well. Just to dispel some myths, we're not a private company. We are fundamentally part of the three councils of that joint committee. We're not a legal independent organisation. One of the things that we do have within our remit is basically setting the terms and conditions and negotiating these for our employees. So overall within Tayside Contracts, staff are employed by Tayside Contracts. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, the next one, sorry, my apologies. Basically, from a construction division and a facility services division, these are separated into some of the services that we cover. It's not everything. It's detailed on the slides there. But overall, we carry out within the facility services division, catering, cleaning, janitorial, school crossing, patrol services for all three of the council areas. Again, that's directly to some of the council estate and through the private and PPP schools. From the construction division side, there's roads maintenance, winter maintenance, street lighting, quarry provision, vehicle maintenance and fleet management. In addition to these two, if you want to say, core service provisions, we also have support services that we engage ourselves within Tayside Contracts to assist in the delivery of the service. So some of the core ones are HR, IT and finance. So a very, very broad brush overview of what Tayside Contracts delivers. We did provide a presentation to a number of elected members back in early 2018. And that's maybe something inlays in the teeth away from here, if that was benefit for some of the elected members again within Angus Council, but I'm sure that's something that we could facilitate. Yeah. So we can move on to the next slide, please. So as has been highlighted by Mark today, we're bringing forward the annual performance report for Tayside Contracts, which covers the period 1920. Tayside Contracts, like the various councils, are required through the Local Government Act 2003 to provide an annual performance report. Slight difference for Tayside Contracts is that unlike the local authorities, where there's quite specific requirements laid down through Audit Scotland to monitor on key performance areas to allow a comparison across all 32 within Scotland. Due to Tayside Contracts' unique position, a number of these particular performance indicators don't relate to ourselves. So what we've had to do and develop over the years is our own annual performance report. And I think it's fair to say that the annual performance report that we provide is more about highlighting our achievements and developments on the year. The performance report is linked to our business plan. We have a business plan that was run from 2017 to 2020, and there was 4 key areas identified within that we were trying to highlight, and that was under people, performance, partnership and perception. So you'll see within the report, that's what that sort of lays out. Some of the other areas within that sort of subdivision, we are trying to cover areas round about financial performance, a society impact, quality, environment, health and safety are the areas that we are trying to highlight. I just want to move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So within our report, under page 121 of your pack, these are some of the key top performing highlights that we have identified within our performance report. And also on page 153 of the pack highlights the 12 key performance indicators that basically supplement our business plan. So actual indicators that we've set up. So some of it was presented previously by the fire service. Of those particular 12, in 2019-20, we achieved 9 of those, and 3 of those that we didn't achieve. And again, we can pick up on that later on. So out of the key areas that have been identified on the slide that's up at the moment, some particular highlights for ourselves, obviously returning a surplus beyond what was expected in 2019 of to 1.5 million of a surplus to a share of the 3 councils. 5 million meals within the school estate, etc. Construction division delivering again a successful winter maintenance in conjunction with the various client partners. Our health and safety side, we had accidents that reduced by 13 from the previous year. It does state within the report it's 150 reduction. That is an error that's been picked up, which we will have to correct. And on some of the, if you want to say, environmental side, we are keen to ensure that we are resourcing locally. 35% of the resources we use within the catering side were sourced from the local Tayside area, and 75% of that within, 73% of that within Scotland itself. So that's a very just sort of broad brush overview of Tayside contracts, some of the key points from our annual performance report. And I'll hand over to Keith now to just give you a further overview of what we are looking to do going forward.
Thank you very much, Dougie. Yeah, if you can have the next slide, please. I think a significant focus for us, as no doubt yourselves, is the financial situation. Obviously, we're all facing in-year pressures with the strains of COVID, and also future years going forward with the significant situation with the multi-billion deficit across the United Kingdom. So we are absolutely part of the council's measures to take our share of any potential savings, and we're very much focused on savings being delivered through increased income generation. And as a commercial organisation, that's a very strong focus of our opportunities. As Dougie said, a lot of our income is from out with the councils, so if we can generate more income, we're protecting jobs and services. Big focus for us on efficiencies, transformation, new ways of working, and again to make the public pound go further, and the last resort is service reduction, so that we are doing our best to protect jobs and protect services. Next slide, please. Dougie mentioned that we have a business plan. We are preparing our next business plan, and this is our current thinking, bit draft at the moment, but wanted to share it with you in terms of what we say we want to be, what we exist to do, and how we'll deliver it. So we see ourselves being high performing, expanding, proud of what we do, and chosen for how we do it. We don't want councils or indeed private firms to be choosing us out of pity or out because a joint agreement or a memorandum of understanding says so. We want to be chosen for how we do it, and that's going to be a very strong focus for us going forward. We want to provide essential public and commercial services, and we want to deliver it through 5 Cs. And with your permission, I'll just very quickly go through our thoughts around these 5 Cs. So next slide, please. Okay, well, the whole foundation is based on our culture, our relationships, and our people. Our 3 main priorities are around the councils, our constituent councils, building transparency and trust, having that shared belief that Tayside Contracts is part of your council and we're part of each other as our futures are bound together, and certainly engagement with elected members, chief officers and senior officers, etc. And so that's why I'm so delighted to be presenting to you today. And I think there's a bit of honesty, especially when things go wrong. We're all in the same boat together. Our staff, we want to create this one team staff approach as part of a bigger team, as part of the 3 constituent councils, focusing on engagement, empowerment, being more commercial, risk astute and agile, certainly the organisational development aspirations we want to go with. And we want to be mindful of recovery and renewal from the pandemic, going back to new normal ways of working. So things like less office working. We've had a lot of efficiencies from staggered starts in construction, so we don't want to lose that. And again, the customer element, we want to be chosen for how we do it. We want to meet current needs, but want to anticipate future needs, such as the low carbon agenda. So we want to be really out ahead of things, so that we are offering services to both constituent council customers, but also private and other public services. Next slide, please. I think, to me, the sort of strap line at the top of the page is what this is about. It's about having that business head, being a commercial organisation, but being very rooted in the community. Every pound we make in terms of our commercial activities is protecting jobs and services within the Tayside local authority areas. Just some examples here of the type of things we want to be looking at. So obviously the foresight and the investment of Dundee City and Angus councils in terms of the Tayside Meals Production Centre, great opportunities around that to offer wider community meals, services to other local authorities, NHS and any institution that produces food. We're looking to potentially partner on the National Trunk Road contract for the northeast of Scotland. That's a 10-year contract and very significant potential income generation. I mentioned low carbon there, so there's some of the ideas around that one. And again, we want to be looking at the opportunities for a commercial approach, offering construction activities, inspection and testing, things like a one-stop shop for things like fleet management, catering, cleaning and FM. And there's also considerable income operation opportunities through the Tay-Cities deal, a lot of connected to construction activities there as well. So again, very much our focus going forward. Next slide, please. We're looking to work closer with councils. We do have some really good examples. We have roads maintenance partnerships, street lighting partnerships, catering, cleaning, and also the Tayside Meals Production Centre that I've talked about. So we're building on a foundation of a lot of very good partnership working. I think short term, we have 3 councils who have 3 different specifications: scheduling, measuring and awarding. And I think getting a degree of standardisation can bring efficiencies and much better cross-border working. And then in the medium long term, again, this has to be obviously discussed with our constituent councils as to how they want to go, but I've just bullet pointed a flavour of some of the things we might want to be looking at in future going ahead. So singles facility management, a regional roads collaborative, housing services, etc. So again, very much the direction of travel we'd be wanting to have further conversations about as we look to build a collaborative offer from Tayside Contracts. Next slide, please. Continuous improvement is a huge part of what we do. We've talked about new ways of working, the sort of home and off environment, shared performance management systems so that we can share the trust around our activities with our constituent councils. And then procurement, I've got something called 40-40-20. Only 20% of savings, or 20% of savings, can be released from a tendering process, but it's what you do to specify your procurement requirements and how you manage the contract subsequently that generate the 40% and the other 40%. So again, there's efficiencies and effectiveness we can look for there. And then going forward, things like 7-day working, better use of assets, rationalisation of buildings, sharing facilities with our constituent councils, and moving towards a transformation programme where everybody gets a chance to contribute and put their ideas forward. Next slide, please. And finally, we want to support council strategic priorities. Angus Council will have strategic priorities around equalities and fairness, and it's how we support that through things like community benefits, through employability, procurement, employability, food growing strategies, etc. Economy and education through things like Taste Cities Deal, the inclusive tea elements of that. You know, as a large employer, as Dougie says, 3,100 employees, we have great opportunities to offer support to young people, to people who are maybe at the furthest end of the job market, and even linking into things like curriculum in schools, apprentices, engineering, catering opportunities for people, and indeed supporting local businesses via procurement within the rules. And finally, in terms of the environment, obviously we want to help councils meet your own net carbon targets around transport, waste and energy and resilience, but also the environmental benefits from procurement, which we can weave into some of our significant contracts, and also share with partners around external funding opportunities. Next slide, please. We do have several challenges. Obviously, right now, the current focus is on COVID response. If we've heard already, there's significant challenges just actually delivering services, pressures and priorities at the moment. So this is an ambitious programme, but we do need to be mindful of COVID. We also need to be mindful of improving what we do whilst providing the essential services, the 5 million meals per year, the 300,000 kilometres of road that we look after. So it is a balance. I think there's something about prioritisation from the collaborative opportunities, from the commercial activities. What can we do to prioritise, and what's the agreement between the councils in terms of that, and then sharing that appetite and willingness amongst councils and Tayside contracts at all levels, at elected member level, at senior exec level, the middle manager level. So we've got shared purpose, priorities, and an engagement to have dialogue. And as I said at the start, this is all based on a foundation of trust. So that's how we see ourselves going forward, very trustful relationship with our constituent councils and with our partners. So next slide, please. So just in summary, that's the vision for taking forward our plan for growth across the 5 Cs. And just next slide, please. And thanks very much for the opportunity to present to you. Hopefully, convener, I've not gone on, I mean, myself and Dougie haven't gone on too long. We'd be grateful for any questions you have around Tayside contracts, our annual performance report, our performance indicators, I think was covered in the covering report, and anything in terms of our future direction. So thank you once again.
Well, thank you very much for that informative presentation, Keith. Can I now ask members, do they have any questions on the report, starting off with Councillor Whiteside?
Thanks, convener. I've got questions and comments on page 123, 147 and 153.
Okay, Councillor Devine.
131.
Councillor Duff.
128, please.
Councillor Braze.
131, please.
Councillor Miles.
A general comment.
Councillor Bell.
Page 123, please.
Right. Can we start off with Councillor Whiteside on page 123?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the apprenticeship scheme. It's very welcome, provides opportunities and employment in the Tayside area. I just want to ask Keith what his plans are for expanding this initiative, and what areas of the business he hopes to expand into.
Thanks very much, Councillor Whiteside. Yeah, early days for me, but it's certainly in terms of intent and how we support employability, very much so. I mean, I think you know, the work that Tayside Contracts does lends itself really to apprenticeship type activities, particularly around construction, catering, facilities management. So that's something we've not got into the detail around that. I think we're setting out our agenda in terms of the business plan, but 100% concur with what you're saying. We want to give young people the opportunity. If you look at the demographics of our workforce in Tayside Contracts, it's pretty weighted towards older people. So again, bringing fresh blood into the organisation is a fantastic way that we can support young people in these difficult times, but also regenerate the balance of the demographics within the organisation.
Thanks. Okay. Councillor Duff, page 128.
Yeah, thanks, convener, and thanks for the presentation. And I think the report, I don't know, I think it's the first time I've seen a Tayside Contracts report. I've certainly had a presentation maybe several years ago from senior officers on Tayside Contracts. So I think it's very welcome. and thanks for the presentation. I had a query really about the bar chart on page 128, which is the cumulative surpluses returned to councils. And I thought it's quite useful, but I'm conscious that it's very difficult to see what the surplus was returned each year. And I guess with inflation, we would expect that to increase over the 20-odd year period. It looks a very straight graph to my eyes. I just wonder if that could be maybe refined in future so we can actually see what the surplus was each year, rather than, if you like, looking at a cumulative surplus, which looking for the differences between each year is quite tricky.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. I think that's very helpful feedback. One of the things I was quite keen to hear from elected members today is just in terms of the performance reporting that we're delivering, but also just the format. And if that's not working for you, yeah, absolutely, we'll take that comment back for future versions.
If I could just comment on that one, if the graph had been presented with the annual surpluses at the bottom and the accumulated surplus on the top, it might have made a bit more sense. At least then you would have been able to see how the annual surplus was increasing. Okay, sorry. I missed Councillor Bell on page 123. I apologise for that.
That's okay. Thank you, convener. Yeah, following on from Councillor Whiteside's point, I was pleased to hear about your ambitions for employability in the apprenticeships. Could you tell me what your gender split is on your modern apprentices at the moment, please, Keith? And if you have plans to extend the roles that might offer any gender and opportunity across occupations that might traditionally have a gender specific majority of people taking that line of work.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bell. I might turn to Frank just in a second in terms of the gender balance with our apprentices. I know there's sort of gender balance in Tayside contracts, I believe, and Frank may correct me, is something like 70% female, 30% male, and absolutely want to give equality of access to all groups. So yeah, that's certainly something I'm very keen on, and hopefully I've bought enough time for Frank maybe to respond to your specific point. If we don't, then we'll come back to you. So Frank, if I can invite you in.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Yeah, Councillor Bell, I'll tell you what we're looking at specifically. I share your concern about underrepresentation of people from certain backgrounds, different genders, for certain jobs that are traditionally associated with a particular gender, with a particular age group, a particular ethnicity even. What we're going to do with our job adverts is say that people who are part of an underrepresented group are guaranteed a job interview if they meet the person's specification. Now, for a long time, we and the councils have done that for people with disabilities. So it's a form of job interviews being guaranteed, but not just for disabilities, but for all 9 protected characteristics under the Equality Act, because we are trying to walk that thin line between trying to promote, say, young people, because Keith's right, our workforce is tooled to get them into the workplace, but not fall foul of age discrimination legislation. So, because we can't positively discriminate, but I think that is the way to do it, to seek out the demographics for Tayside, then see what kind of representation we'll have per job type, and that would then legitimise us saying, if you're from these kind of backgrounds or this kind of person, then you're guaranteed a job interview if you meet the spec. We're going to introduce that in April next year, and I think it will have a major impact in shaking up the traditional model of who works where.
Thank you. Right. Page 131, Councillor Devine.
Thanks, convener, and welcome to Keith and Dougie and Frank to the first Scrutiny and Audit meeting of Angus Council anyway. I used to be on Tayside contracts, and at that point we were really pleased at the trend of school meal numbers going upwards. But I was a bit perturbed to see them on the slide here on page 131. I am thinking, however, that there was quite an increase recently between September and October this year when you reintroduced the hot food. Our Director of Education told us that it was quite a whopping increase actually, so that was good news. And maybe that will change that green bar. Do you think that this is going to be on the upward trend now? Or how do you see this going? Whoever wants to answer that?
If I can lead again, Councillor Devine, and perhaps invite Frank, I think we need to separate two things here. One is what we're having to deal with in COVID times, and yes, we've had a significant reduction in the school meal numbers because we've post lockdown we've had to offer a cold bag meal service because that's all we could offer for safety reasons. Since the October holidays, we've introduced a hot bagged meal, which I think that's possibly the element that your Director of Education appraised you of. I think our sort of meals leapt by about 30% from a very kind of depressed figure, I've got to be honest. I think we were down at about 43%. As of January, we'll be with the Tayside Meals Production Centre up and running, so we'll be again offering an even better product. So again, that's sort of very positive. I kind of share your concerns around the number of school meals reducing. That's a very strong area of focus for us. We do, in all honesty, have the balance between providing healthy nutritional meals, which is a Scottish Government legal requirement on us. And we do know that teenagers sometimes want to just get out of the school environment, and sometimes they don't necessarily want to eat the healthiest of foods. So that's always a bit of a balance with us. But I think there's a strong focus. The team were already looking at that as an issue prior to COVID. There was a large survey that had gone out to school meal users just to kind of take the temperature in terms of what the issues were and what we can do to enhance the service. Yeah, it's a very much a focus for us, but it's strange times because we're just dealing with COVID at the moment. So it's difficult to give a comprehensive answer around that, but absolutely we want to be making sure that we maximise the school meal uptake, and I think the Tayside Meals Production Centre and the quality of meals coming out from that, I think, will be a very strong factor. I'm also minded by the information in the media today around political suggestions around introducing free school meals for all primary children for breakfast and lunch. So again, that might be a little while away, but that has a bearing on our thoughts as well. So there's quite a lot in the mix at the moment. So but just to give you the reassurance around the school meal number levels going down, which is actually reflective of the national position, but it's something we have very much on our radar that we want to reverse the trend.
Okay. Councillor Bray, same page, 131.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Yes, I think this is really good to see Tayside Contracts forward with this report to Scrutiny and Audit. Now, we spend a lot of money producing school meals, and there's bound to be a percentage of wastage, both in production and at point of service and consumption. But I don't recall ever seeing figures for wastage. And it would seem to me that if we are to reduce wastage, we first of all have to measure it. So I was wondering if you do measure wastage.
Thanks, Councillor Brays. Yeah, again, I'll maybe say a few introductory comments and invite Frank in for further information. Wastage, because our meals are pre-ordered from the consumers of them, the sort of level of food production matches what the actual pre-order is. So therefore, we don't have the wastage that, say, for example, a supermarket or a restaurant would have, because they don't know what the level of people coming into them actually is. Any food that we don't use, we would kind of reuse, store and reuse again. I think the issue is possibly plate waste, and I know colleagues have been working hard with our education colleagues around just having somebody at the school meals to encourage the young people to make the most of what's on their plate and eat it up, which again prevents wastage. But in terms of actual figures, I'd maybe defer to Frank to give some more information on that.
I haven't got actual figures. If I could get actual figures, the answer to your question in essence, on top of everything else that Keith's just added, I was going through my list of things I was going to speak to, but I've ticked them all off, Keith. That we do measure waste. It's been a big issue for us for many years, and you're right to separate them from production and plate waste. And yeah, for members of Angus Council or the Tayside Contracts Joint Committee, I could easily draw up a short paper that says here's the trend of production waste and plate waste as far as we can measure it. Because in every kitchen every day, our cooks do measure waste. I can assure you.
Okay.
Well, I think it'd be really useful to have those figures. If I can have a wee a supplementary question as well on a similar thing regarding school meals. I'm led to believe that water from Yorkshire is trucked up here in single-use plastic bottles for consumption in Angus schools. And if that is the case, it would seem to drive a coach and horses through any environmental policies we have. Could you give me a wee bit of information on that?
Yeah, certainly, Councillor Brays. And maybe to respond to your earlier point, yeah, we're more than happy to provide the figures you'd asked for around food waste. We will do that. There's probably two comments here. One is at just a purely financial level. There's tens of thousands of pounds of difference in the procurement cost of purchasing the water from perhaps not from local suppliers, and it kind of goes back to the point I was making earlier on about using procurement as a lever to lever in environmental benefits. But right now the difference in price is tens of thousands of pounds, and that's why we had to procure to the cheapest, which was, as I said, considerably cheaper. But there's other factors when one assesses procurement. So it could be things like community benefit, employability benefit, environmental benefit, and we'd want to be looking at that as a sort of wider basket of criteria by which we make the judgments. But we are where we are with the numbers that we have, and it is a considerable saving, or it would be a considerable additional cost if we went to, say, one of the local suppliers right now.
Yeah, I kind of get that, but surely the bairns should be drinking water that comes out of the taps in the schools and avoiding all that road haulage and all those little plastic bottles. That's maybe not your problem to deal with, though.
We're happy to take that away, Councillor Brays, and give consideration to that. I totally take your point, and certainly in terms of if we don't have to buy things because it's the commodity is readily available in the schools, then obviously we want to minimise costs. So happy to take that away and consider it.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Councillor Whiteside, page 147.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, it's around the Tayside, the Tay Cuisine Central Production Unit. As everybody will know, there was quite a bold decision to invest in this quite recently, and we had presentations on all the councils regarding how this would work, etc. Keith's already mentioned the decision by the Scottish Government to expand the free school meals, which is likely to increase the demand quite significantly. So this decision is going to now look quite judicious, I would think. What I'm concerned about is ensuring that we retain the ability to source as much local food as possible, including the ability for small suppliers to provide food. And it's not only environmentally sound and better for the children to be eaten local, it's also food security, especially given Brexit coming up. So just want some reassurance around retaining the ability for small suppliers to feed into the supply chain in the production unit.
Thanks very much, Councillor Whiteside. Couldn't agree with you more about the judicious foresight around the central production unit, and it gives that extra capacity for Dundee City and Angus councils around changes in school food. So, you know, that puts yourselves in an incredibly strong position with that one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we would really want to support small suppliers. I know Councillor Miles and myself have already discussed this as an issue. we want to support, obviously there are procurement rules which we must follow, but we can support local suppliers through things like meet the buyer events, sharing with them the types of things they could consider inputting their bids, etc., so that their bids are as best as they can be, and that's the sort of thing that we want to do. But yeah, very much we are part of the local community in Tayside. We'd be delighted if Tayside firms won all of the contracts within the rules, and we're happy to work with them around that.
Thank you.
Okay, and page 153, Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you again. It was just around the KPIs. Obviously, the procurement KPI, it covers a wide range of goods because Tayside Contracts is such a big organisation. I wonder if it'd be useful to split it into different items, such as food being separate from other types of goods and materials.
Yeah, we're happy to look at that. Thanks very much for that feedback. Yeah, we'll look into that, Councillor Whiteside, for future reporting purposes.
Thank you. Councillor Miles, you wanted a general comment, question? Need to unmute, Bob.
That's better. The button wasn't working for a moment. Now, first of all, I'd like to welcome Keith to your post in Tayside Contracts. You've big boots to fill with Ian Waddle, and his long term he's been there. And it's a little worrying now that I'm almost the longest serving person on Tayside Contracts. Been there over 20 years. Never mind. You came in a very challenging time with the COVID and the extra cleaning duties you had to take over, and all the other problems you had to deal with. But I would like to wish you and your team all the best in fulfilling what is a very good partnership working between the councils and Tayside Contracts. On a couple of issues, I might have raised the school meal issue. So I did at the Tayside Contracts meeting, but it's been covered by others. So I would like to point out a lot of the dip in the uptake came after the Scottish Government's regulations came out, and Tayside Contracts had to adhere to that. And that was supplying food that the kids weren't very keen to take up on. And that was one of the big reasons of the dip in numbers there. On the construction side, I noticed you may be getting a trunk road contract again. That would be extremely welcome. I do have a long enough memory to remember when Tayside Contracts used to operate all the trunk roads and did a very good job indeed. So wish you all the best and on with that. So back to the school meals. I have spoken to some local suppliers, and they are very keen to work with you to supply a very nutritional meal. And I'll speak to you later about that. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Good afternoon, everybody. Just from following on from what Councillor Braze's final question there, and as with the exception of Councillor Laurie, probably one of the councillors that's had school meals relatively recently. There is water made available, tap water made available to students still. Can I just check that? Like, you can go in and get tap water if you request it. It's not a case of they're locked into bottled water now. Just wanted to check in with that. And also on the subject of waste, and in particular, again, I would really like to see the figures that Councillor Braze has asked for. Are there any issues with people ordering meals and then not taking them up, but those meals are already delivered? They've taken an alternative option.
Thanks, Councillor MacDonald. Yeah, in terms of water available to students, I can only speak. I had lengthy experience at working with Perth and Kinross Council closely with my education colleagues. So, as far as I'm aware, water's freely available in all the schools, and I wouldn't anticipate that would be any different in Angus Council. But perhaps council colleagues might be better placed than me to advise on that. Waste, yet take your point about wanting to see the figures, and then ordering meals. That might be one I might refer on to Frank, who's probably got more of a better picture than myself.
So yeah, it's a very occasional problem. Initially, it was a problem with the pre-order system, and I'd have to say one of the biggest reasons why our production waste has managed to be reduced it on to minimal, going on zero, is because everybody is now, who's using the pre-order system, is buying into it. Now, of course, it's been extended to secondary schools as well. So when people order their meals, 99 times out of 100, they will turn up and have that meal.
Okay. Right. There's no more questions. Do we agree the recommendations? Agreed. Thank you. Right, let's move on. Well, what we can say is we can excuse Tayside contracts. If you've got other things you want to do, please carry on. We'll move on to item 7, which is the internal audit activity update. Can I call on Kathy Wiley, please?
Well, thank you. This is the normal progress report around the planned internal audit work and the implementing of internal audit and counter fraud recommendations. And I'm also asking you today to agree to removing one of the items from the plan. Just before I get into some of the detail around what's been happening, I just want to draw attention at the top of page 156. I've got an update there around some of the staff within the team who've been working with the Council's Emergency Centre. The internal auditor who was previously working with them until the beginning of August is back working with them again, half-time with audit and half-time with the Emergency Centre until the end of the year, just to cover for holidays and other things that are happening there. There is some discussion being undertaken around how that will be resourced going forward to allow him to come back into the audit team from the beginning of the year. So if I go then to, I think it's page 159, just as you know, we've got an audit pool now rather than a plan, just because it's been quite difficult being able to take some things forward. So since the last time that I've spoken to you, we've brought personal protective equipment, petty cash, IT interfaces and IT security controls in response to COVID-19 into the plan, and we're working on those areas now. All the audit work that we've been doing involving procurement staff is on hold to allow the procurement team to deal with COVID-19 related procurement activity, and particularly the key supplier support processing that they're undertaking in relation to the adult social care contracts. And this is just a bit about the car parking income and contract management audit. That stems back to 2018-19, and we've done a bit of work on that, but it has, for various reasons, that piece of work stalled and had been on hold since March. And I really feel that at this point we should take this one out of the audit for a number of reasons. On page 160 there, I've summarised these. Car parking income is currently suspended. There's a review of car parking charges actually underway now. The external audit from 2019-20 would have looked at the recording of the income from car parking, and so some of the things that we wanted to do from this audit are really have been superseded, and I feel that that work would be better, the time that it would take to finish that piece of work would be better used on other things that have got a higher risk attached to them. We move on then to page 161. We have the table with all the work that's currently on the go and what stage it's at. I'll have to apologise, the headings on this table seem to have gone all to pot, so we'll try and make sure that that's sorted out for the next time that we present the information. There's only one thing within the table that I wanted to talk about. On page 163, we have the SIAS compliance external review. That review was recommenced in September. The fieldwork is now complete. I've had my final meeting with the external reviewer. There's nothing significant coming out of the review that we weren't already including within the improvement plans that we've already got. They're concluded, we're compliant, but the report hasn't been published or hasn't been issued to me yet. So I'm hoping to get that this week, and that we'll be able to bring that to the January meeting. If we move on then to the actual items that we're presenting this time round in terms of new work, we've got gifts and hospitality register and registers of interests, the leader programme, and the continuous auditing on data analysis that we do around payroll and accounts payable. And it's all quite good news this week. with gifts and hospitality register and the register of interest, the overall conclusion that we've given on that has been comprehensive assurance. We've looked there at the guidance that's available in relation to this, the information that's made available to keep councillors and employees aware of their responsibilities in relation to this. We've looked at the disclosure forms and making sure that they're being recorded properly and that the registers accurately reflect what's been disclosed by councillors and employees. And we've got comprehensive assurance around all of those. As well as the audit work that we undertook there, we also completed a self-assessment against an anti-bribery guidance, gifts and hospitality best practice guidelines that were available, and we confirmed that the council was following best practice that these guidelines presented us. There's one recommendation which didn't actually affect the overall assessment for this audit, and that was around when we looked at the employee code of conduct, we identified that it hadn't been fully reviewed since 2010, and so we've made a recommendation that review should be undertaken. We did identify quite a lot of good practice within here and some other planned improvements and changes that are underway moving forward around some of the design of the information, the pro formas for the recording of the information and how things will be recorded going forward. From page 169 onwards, we've got the information around LEADER. As you're aware, that programme has been ongoing for a number of years and we report on this every year, and our key item that we're reporting on here is just that we are, when we're looking at this, that we are complying with the service level agreement that we have with the Scottish Government around providing this service. We've had a few things in the past that we've had recommendations around, and the Scottish Government themselves have come in and done reviews on the LEADER programme in Angus and come up with pretty similar recommendations to the ones that we've had. And there was a Scottish Government review in March. I'm on page 170 here. In March, the Scottish Government reviewed the Council's arrangements and they had an amber assessment there. Since that amber assessment, there's been further correspondence with Scottish Government and they've accepted the actions have been cleared in terms of the things that were raised. We've also, as part of this audit, looked at the recommendations that we've had previously, and the only recommendation that is outstanding now is one that the Scottish Government need to do in terms of how something is recorded in the national database that they use. Subsequent to our audit, the European Union have begun a review of the Scottish Government's own monitoring system, and they're asking further questions around one of the projects that the Scottish Government reviewed when they were looking at Angus Council's LEADER programme. We're still not 100% certain what the outcome of that would be, and so it's possible that there would be a small amount to repay if they don't agree with some of the information that's been given back to them, but we just need to wait and see what they say about that. So because we've actually been able to check that all of the actions raised by ourselves and the Scottish Government in the past have all been now implemented, and in particular the LARC system that the Scottish Government runs, there's been a huge effort this year to get all of the information that should be recorded in that into the system, and we've checked that that update has been done correctly, and so we've been able to give a comprehensive assurance for this year. Again, all on page 171, all 4 of the objectives have come out with a green assessment this time round. And then the next item is data analytics on page 172, and we look at both creditors, accounts payable and payroll. Again, in both instances, we've got comprehensive assurance. In terms of creditors, we're looking at where there's been invoices that have been registered and authorised for payment by the same employee, and there were a small number of those, but they all had satisfactory explanations for them. And in terms of payroll, we look at duplicate or missing NI numbers and high value payments, and again, a small number of these are identified, but they've all been satisfactorily explained and are legitimate. We then move on to the actions that have been agreed from internal audit recommendations and counter fraud recommendations. In March, when we began our COVID-19 response, we put the due dates for all of the recommendations to the end of September, just to give people a bit of leeway in terms of the work that they needed to do. People have now come back and have extended some of those dates again. So on page 174, the actions in progress due date extended are showing most of the actions that are still outstanding. There's not anything in particular I want to draw attention to there, apart from the 2017-18 item there that is around updating financial regulations. That is underway at the moment and should be finished by the end of this month. And I think that's all I want to say about the items in this report. If anybody has got any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Right, bids for questions? No questions? Anyone wish to make a comment? No comments. Do we agree the recommendations? Agreed. Thank you.
Agreed.
Let's move on to item 8, which is the Audit Scotland COVID-19 guide for audit and risk committees update. Kathy, that's you again.
Okay, thank you. As you say, this is a report that I've pulled together from information from across the council to answer the questions that Audit Scotland had identified in this guide that they had produced for Audit and Risk Committee members. I think there's a huge amount of information in here. It's cross-referenced to other information that you've been receiving throughout the last few months. The only other observation I would make is to say that this is a snapshot in time. Some of these issues are issues that will remain going forward, and things will change in terms of how response to these. And so these questions are ones that you should be keeping in mind as we go forward, not just in scrutiny and audit, but within the other areas that you're involved in. And I don't have anything that I want to particularly draw attention to. I think, again, if there's anything in here that you would want to know further about, I think what we're asking here is just to note what's in here and to identify any areas where further information or action is considered to be required.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Bids for questions? Councillor Bell.
Page 185, please.
Anyone else? Councillor Devine.
General comments.
Anyone else? Okay, Councillor Bell, page 185.
Thank you. Thank you for this report and the last one, Kathy. I wanted to pick up on the risk, resilience and health and safety and the extent of the partnership working. And when you look at some of the issues that our organisations, our partnerships have been dealing with and the agencies they've been involved with, I could see, you know, just how major this is and perhaps out of people's comfort zones. I'm particularly concerned around the potential, or in fact the reality of vicarious trauma in our workforce, and you know, not just health and well-being and resilience and sickness absence, but that deeper level of the impact of the scale of the issues that our people have been dealing with. So I wondered if anything had been picked up around that, if you were aware, or if there was a way of trying to capture that in future.
I think I'm certainly aware that this is being discussed in a number of the meetings that I've been taking part in over the last few months. It's definitely something that all of the CLT members and other senior managers are aware of, but I'm not sure if I'm able to tell you exactly what's happening around that. I know things are happening, but there might be other people who are here at the meeting who would be better placed really to answer that question.
I can come in on that if you want me to, Councillor King or Councillor Bell. I just don't know how to put my hand up on Zoom. I'm sorry. Can I go ahead? Yeah, I totally agree with Councillor Bell. I mean, you know, it's something that's concerning us all just now, and everyone is dealing with very different circumstances, and it's challenging for everybody, regardless of what their circumstances are. So we've got a number of different things in place in terms of meeting with staff engagement events, leadership events, management events. We've even organised a couple of Christmas get-togethers, which I'm going to send you out an invite to come along and hopefully see people feeling a bit more cheerful around what's going on just now. Over and above that, as you'll be aware, we've got a good counselling service that we refer people to. But the health and wellbeing of the staff, largely led through the OD team, but kept alive through the leadership forums that we have, because it's crucial to us, and the monitoring of absence as well is something that we're doing on a week-to-week basis. So it's a really important point, but please be assured it's one that we're attending to as best we can in the circumstances. And when people go missing, and what I mean by that is, you know, when people are looking out for each other. So if they haven't heard from someone, or someone hasn't joined a meeting, there are different ways of contacting them to ensure they're okay. Or like me last Tuesday, did a complete blot with their IT system. So I hope that helps.
Okay. Councillor Devine, general comment?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I mean, reading this, I can see the usefulness of the information, but I actually feel that this was a piece of work which was so much for the staff to undertake at this particular point in time. And I'm concerned that Audit Scotland were actually asking for this, especially when your staff, Cathy, have been so depleted, helping out in a whole variety of ways. I just wanted my comments noted. Thank you.
I agree entirely with your comments, Councillor Devine. Sometimes I think there's a bunch of people in Audit Scotland who are underemployed and are having to find ways of filling their time, resulting in things like this. Okay, if that's it, do we agree the recommendations on item 8? Fine, thank you. Can we proceed to item 9, which is the scrutiny review of parking charges action plan follow-up, starting on page 201. Cathy, please.
Okay, thank you. This follows up, comes a year after the original scrutiny report has come to you, and it was agreed at that time that follow-up would be brought at this time. So what I'm asking you to do really here is to note the position with the follow-up and to identify if there are any other areas where you would like further information or action to be undertaken, and to decide if there's further follow-up reporting that you would like to come to this committee.
Okay, any comments?
Can I just say one other thing, please?
Sure, carry on, Cathy.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, just at the top of page 202, just at 4.2 there, we've got 4 actions that are complete with further related actions in progress in relation to 2 of those. 1 action's well progressed and completion's planned for February 21, and there's another action which has been superseded by actions that are in the change governance action plan. I think it's important to note that these are not particularly smart type actions that have got an end date in sight. Some of them are things that are partly to do with changes in people's behaviours, and these things will be carried forward over time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bids for questions? Councillor Duff. Unmute, Bill.
Mine's really a comment rather than a question, convener.
Okay. Anyone else? Carry on, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I'm pleased to see this report and like to thank the work that Cathy's done on it. Yeah, I mean, this was for members who've not been in the scrutiny audit before. We carried out a lot of subcommittee sort of investigations in the last administration. Because of the change plan and the pressure on council officers, we haven't done any. This was the only one we've done in this administration, but I think it was a valuable piece of work. I note the comments of where we are in the action. Certainly as an elected member, I think we are now seeing more option appraisals in reports. We're moving forward with the parking MOG, which was set up really as one of the consequences, I guess, of this scrutiny and audit review. I note that we're looking at a number of things that were recommended. The after action review, I think, is a good practice. In terms of elected members scrutinising, I think the SNP group do try and make an effort to challenge and to scrutinise things in all reports, and clearly we've done that today. So pleased to see this piece of work, and I think it is one of the important things that Scrutiny Audit can do if we have the ability to set up subgroups to look at particular important issues.
Thank you. Councillor Boyd.
Yes, hold on. So I totally agree with the comments that Councillor Duff had made. It's poignant that today, here on the 1st of December, you can now have your say. And I think there's about a fortnight, so I'll just do my commercial break on that just now and ensure that maybe the courier will highlight to people that can now have their say. It's just a pity that people weren't given their say in the first place, because we wouldn't have wouldn't have had this complete and absolute fiasco, that has been going on for well over 2 years. Countless amendments that were voted down by the administration. Crazy times, but we are where we are. The electorate will not forget this, but the main reason for saying something was, look, let's make sure we have our say. I think once before I'd shown about that 25 years ago there was an article in the papers saying how everyone was so proud that we didn't do car parking in Angus. We didn't learn 25 years ago, or no, this administration didn't learn 25 years ago, and they've not learned anything over the last 3 years of how to deal with this problematical way. People are just not willing to pay for the car parking. End of. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, would you like to put your hands down? We agree the recommendations on this report?
Yep.
Agreed. Thank you. Let's pop on to item 10, corporate counter fraud mid-year review, page 206. Kathy, please.
Thank you. This is the 6-month review, just summarising the work that the counter fraud team have been undertaking and talking about what we're going to be doing going forward. Just very briefly, there's a bit in there about COVID-19, and that's had an impact in terms of the things that we've not been able to do because of COVID-19, because one of the members of staff was in the emergency centre, and also because other people have been otherwise engaged, and we've not been able to do the face-to-face interviews that we would normally do as part of some of the counter fraud work that we undertake. But we've also been involved, some of the team members, in getting involved looking at things like the business support grants and how that was being set up to make sure that we had made the system as strong as we possibly could. We're carrying on investigating as well as we can any instances that are brought to our attention in a reactive way, and we're also carrying on with some of the proactive work that we undertake around data matching and looking at where we might be able to identify areas where the council can get money back from people where things are not working perhaps the way they should be. NFI is another thing which we're currently in the process of gathering the information to upload all of that, and we should get the matches back. If you recall, that happens every 2 years. So we get these matches back in January, and we'll start working on these at the beginning of 2021. And I have got Ewan on the call here just now with us, so if there's anything specific that you want to know about any of the items we've noted here, he should be able to give you more information.
Thank you, Kathy. Bids for questions? No questions? Anybody wish to make a comment? No comments? Do we agree the recommendations? Good, thank you very much. And now we come to your last one, Kathy, item 11, reports relevant to the work of the Scrutiny and Audit Committee, starting on page 209. Kathy?
Okay, thank you. This is just what it says. It's other reports that you will probably have already seen, and it's really just there in case there's anything that you want to know more about, and I don't have anything specific to say about any of it.
Okay, bids for questions? No questions? Comments? No comments. Agree with the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 12, which is freedom of information requests, which starts on page 217. And I call on Jackie Buchanan for this one.
Thank you, Convener. This report was requested following upon the annual Governance Statement Assurances report, which was before Scrutiny and Audit on the 25th of August. And as part of that, it was agreed that a report regarding both FOI and EIR requests would come before the committee. You'll see from the report that the regimes, and we've called it throughout the report just the FOISA regime, came into place on the 1st of January 2005. Since April 2013, all Scottish public authorities have been required to provide statistics on requests and decisions that we've dealt with under this regime, and details of any reviews that we've dealt with, and any exemptions or exceptions that have applied for each request. In paragraph 4, there are details in table 1 of the number of requests received from January to September this year, and table 2 provides information on the services dealing with the highest numbers of requests over that same period. There are also at the bottom of that a comparison with the annual number of both FOI and EIR requests received from 2015, and how many were received, as well as the request answered within the statutory time frame. Members will note that from that table over the years there's been a steady increase in the number of requests made to the Council. There's also a table below that on the types of applicants and the various sources of requests, and those are detailed within about 6 or 7 different types. We don't currently record or categorise requests by themes of information. Some information which is repeatedly requested, however, we proactively publish that in the form of open data on the Council's open data portal, and there's examples of that given. Applicants have a right to ask for a review, and there are details there in terms of how that is dealt with, and in turn after that an appeal. We've got details of the requests for review from 2015 to 2020, and also details of appeals during the same period. Towards the end of the report, there are a few issues that we've highlighted in relation to work that's been progressed. There's the commissioning of a new FOI, request management system, and the benefits we see coming through that as it's rolled out. There's also publication on the Council website of a disclosure log, which will give access to information that the Council has previously provided in response to requests. And this will help us hopefully reduce the amount of time we spend providing repeated requests. There'll be increased publication of open data sets for the same reason. And currently, information officers within the Council are kept up to date on an ad hoc basis if and when there's significant decisions affecting the Council that have been made by the Scottish Information Commissioner. And what we're going to do is introduce a regular newsletter to keep them up to date on a more regular basis. In terms of financial implications, all costs associated with dealing with FOI requests, etc., are contained within existing budgets. We don't tend to record the times holistically in terms of how much time we spend on them. Under FOISA, the Council doesn't have to provide information where it would cost over £600 to do so. We can't charge if it's less than 100. What we tend to do is not charge if requests cost less than £400 to process. There's a different system in place in terms of EIRs. There's no defined lower or upper limit for charging, and there's no maximum rate. That being said, we only charge when the cost of compliance is greater than £100. The Council, of course, is legally bound to comply with both FOISA and the EIR regime, and non-compliance carries the risk of reputational damage. And there's also powers of enforcement that are available to the Scottish Information Commissioner. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, bids for questions. Councillor Duff. Page. We need you to unmute, Bill.
219.
219. Councillor Whiteside.
218.
218. Right, okay. Page 218, Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, convener. It's just a general question. I understand that the provision of some of the material that's asked for is really difficult and time consuming, and it puts a lot of pressure on the staff. I'm just wondering though, with the statutory timescale figures, is there any particular type of request that causes this figure to be lower than it might be, that causes a lot of concern for the staff? And just briefly, also on the next page, the biggest figure is individuals. Is there any way of breaking that down further than what we're presented there? Thanks.
So in terms of the first question in relation to where are there challenges in relation to getting requests out in time, I think it just depends on the nature of the requests and also how busy the particular service is. If they have a lot of requests to deal with or other urgent work, it makes it more difficult to spend time. It also depends on the complexity of the requests at times. Obviously during COVID, when our office working is really quite limited, it can also be a question of just getting that data and getting access to it, because it's not as easy as it is when we're all really in the office. So I think there's multiple factors can lead to that. In relation to your second question, I can certainly find out if we can break down the individuals, which is obviously the highest level, and see if we can get any information on that.
Okay. Councillor Duff, page 219.
Yeah, thanks, convener, and thanks for Mrs. Buchanan for producing the report. Yeah, I was just noting that the number of FOI requests have increased 60% since 2015, and I note that we now are having to engage another member of staff to deal with it, which obviously means that we've got less money to spend on providing services. I had a couple of questions. I noticed there was a big increase in FOIs sort of in the middle of the year. It was very low for a few months, then it shot up. I just wondered if we knew what was behind that. And the second question I did have was, I know we've got elected representatives and they're on the list. Do we get any FOIs from elected representatives or elected members of Angus Council? I just was curious about that one.
So in terms of elected members of Angus Council, I'm certainly not aware of any, because we tend to have a situation where if elected members want to ask questions, they do that direct rather than through the FOI system. I could certainly check that and find out. Sorry, can I just ask you what your first question was again, Councillor Duff?
The first question was, do we have any idea why during the start of lockdown the number of requests went very low, and then it seemed to sort of shoot back up in the summertime? I just wonder what was behind that.
I'll find out, certainly. I guess it may have been something to do with the fact that we were in lockdown and people were less inclined to make FOI requests, but I'm just guessing, so I'll find out and I can come back to members on that.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, anything further? No. Right, do we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Councillor Whiteside, you still got your hand up.
Sorry.
We move on to item 13, which is the local government benchmarking tome. I presume this is Vivian Smith that's going to take this.
Convener, it was actually myself that was going to speak to that.
I beg your pardon. It was just who it was down as the director. Oh yeah, the director of finance is there as well, right? Carry on, Mr. Lorimer.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I'm implicated in this one as well as the other director. And good afternoon to the committee. I think to say that there's a huge amount of information in this report would probably be understatement of the day. It is a very lengthy report. There is a lot of information that's in it. Just to get the acronyms out of the way, first of all, I'm going to refer to the LGBF, that is the Local Government Benchmarking Framework. And what this report does is it brings to the committee the LGBF report for the financial year 2018-19. Now, That report is a bit later than coming to the committee than we would originally have intended. That's mainly because the staff that are involved in pulling this report together have been heavily involved in all of the kind of pandemic response related work, and particularly around data and the management of data associated with that. We have tried within the covering report to pick out the kind of key points from the full report, and also in Appendix 1 we've given a bit of a summary in terms of what it means for Angus Council. Paragraph 3.3 of the covering report, this is on page 223, it highlights some of the contextual information, because that's really important in terms of looking at statistics, understanding the context. So it says a little bit about some of the challenges that council have faced in terms of demand for services and reductions in funding, and the prioritisation, all of the things which members of this committee will be very well aware of. I should also flag that within the report, it highlights that the purpose of the LGBF is benchmarking. It's not intended to be a kind of crude league table assessment of council. So that's something I think is worth the committee bearing in mind. And also worth saying that the LGBF data is just one data set which the council should consider when assessing performance. It's not a definitive position. And I want to say a little bit more about our performance-led programme, which is also mentioned in the report just in a minute. Section 4 of the report gives a little bit of, I suppose, high-level information on the main services, so that the report is broken down into the chunks of different types of services that councils provide. We have within Appendix 1, committee members, we've tried to, this is starting on page 227 of the papers, we've tried within there to distill the 140 pages that is in the full report into a kind of more usable summary for the committee. And what we've tried to do in that appendix is really just summarise the performance of Angus Council services relative to the kind of performance in our family groups and the kind of best in Scotland positions. Now, what that shows is a spread of areas where the data indicates that we're doing well, we're doing better than our comparators or better than the Scottish averages. In some instances, we're right up there with the best in Scotland. In other areas, the indicators suggest that it's a less favourable position that we have. So we've tried to bring that out as best as we can. Of course, statistics need to be interpreted with caution. There's a lot of work goes into this publication to try and make sure we're comparing apples and apples, but it's still difficult because councils organise their services in different ways, and so the information needs to be interpreted carefully. Variations in performance through this, I would suggest, is something that flags a potential issue for us to investigate further rather than giving us a specific answer. Going back to the main body of the report, just on page 225, I mentioned the performance-led council programme. Now, this is a piece of work which I think the committee will hear a lot more about over the next 12 to 18 months. At the heart of that programme is an intention for the council and its services to be performance-led. And that means having good performance information, of which LGBF would be just one element, and using that performance information to inform service provision and choices. Self-evaluation is really the key part of that programme. It's more important than ever that we know, and we've got good data to know how our services are performing and what options we have for improvement. So as is outlined in the report, we're building that performance-led programme over 4 stages. And as I say, I think we would expect to bring updates on the progress of that programme to this committee for scrutiny in the months ahead. We've got representatives from each council service attending the meeting today. We've also got our manager for quality improvement and performance, Andrew Carse, on the call. He's the author of the report. So either myself or one of those other officers would be happy to try and answer any questions that the committee may have, convener. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lorimer. Okay, bids for questions. Councillor Duff.
226, 228, really, it's a joint question.
Councillor Devine.
It's really, I think, more a comment on 230.
And Councillor Bell.
A general question, not on any specific page.
Okay then. That was 230, 226, 228. Councillor Duff, page 226, 228.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I had a few comments, but I think given the time, I shall pass on them. But I thought it was a very interesting document and a lot of interesting statistics in it. The question I had really was around roads, and it's between 326 and 328. And apologies if I'm misunderstanding the data, but on the table at the bottom of 326, it's showing that Scottish councils are spending significantly less on roads in 2018-19 than they did in 2010-11, roughly a 20% reduction in spend per kilometre. And then if you look at the table on 328, which gives us a percentage of A, B, C and unclassified roads that should be considered for maintenance, the percentages are pretty well flat. So if you take A-class roads, 30% in 2009-11 and 30% in 2017-2019. So to the layperson, it looks like we're spending less money on roads, but the roads are not deteriorating. Now that's, let's say, a little bit counterintuitive. I just wonder if any of our roads colleagues could explain that, or maybe I've picked up maybe I'm misinterpreting the statistics.
Anyone taking that one?
Hi, convener. If I may, I'll come in. Sorry, I had the same problem. I don't know how to put my hand up. So thank you, convener, and thank you, Councillor Duff. I think your interpretation is correct, Councillor Duff. I think the commentary that Audit Scotland go into suggests that despite declining investment in the road network, it has not seen a significant decline in its condition overall. I think my concern and those of us in the industry is possibly that there's a delay in that the underinvestment as we go forward, or the reducing investment, will indeed in due course lead to a reduction in the road condition, but we believe that is a time lapse between the two that has perhaps not yet materialized. So I think that's sort of one of the comments. One of the other comments I would make is the expenditure can be quite challenging because it does vary year on year, partly because it also includes winter maintenance costs. So that can sometimes skew the investment figures. But I trust that helps answer your question.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's it may catch up with us in due course.
Councillor Devine, page 230.
Thank you. And I wanted to thank Mr. Lorimer for his distillation. We are eternally grateful for that. This was long enough. And it's something I think I'll just keep on my desktop and have a look at now and then, because it's a lot of information to take in, but useful nonetheless. It is a wee bit out of date, of course, but I had to allow myself a wry smile when we're talking about waste recycling, because the administration is, it's very happy to talk about 59.1% being second highest in Scotland, which is great. I absolutely applaud it. But back in 2015-16, we were standing at 59.2% and first in Scotland. So I think maybe we just have to keep things in perspective and remember that. But thank you very much for all of this. It's dense. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, and thanks Ian and everyone involved in that. A huge piece of work there, and that's the kind of basis of my concern around you know, the time lag in this report coming forward, and also the impact of COVID and Brexit, and in terms of how do we consolidate, you know, how we're doing given these massive issues that have been happening all this year and will continue to happen, and what sort of support does COSLA put in to help us make sure that we're recording all the right data in regards to all of those issues.
Anyone want to take that one?
You want me to come back, convener?
You want to come back on that one, yes?
Yeah, I think every piece of data, every graph in every area of activity, 2020 will be, in statistical terms, very clearly an outlier. So, you know, that's going to be a real challenge for every data set that is used probably across the world, actually, because of the scale and impact of the pandemic. Yeah, the LGBF's been running now for quite a number of years, so it's been refined and developed as it's gone along. It's been refined and developed in specific areas where we know that there has been problems. So it's reasonably well established, but it will be difficult to use that data for 2019-20 will be the next year, and the data collation for that is now underway. That year will probably be largely clean of COVID impacts, because it really was just at the very tail end of the year. So the next data set might be okay, but very much take the point that 2021 financial year's data will be very difficult. I suppose what I would say is part of the reason that we're looking at the performance-led council programme, and we see LGBF as just one part of that, is so that we've got, you know, if we've got better or other information locally that we can use to assess our performance and assess where we are and assess where we need to improve, then that's more helpful to us. So it's about having that local knowledge and understanding and being able to use that to inform what we want to do. But there's a number of working groups are part of the LGBF programme. And will continue to be so. So hopefully that gives some reassurance about where this has been and how we'll continue to use it. As I say, the challenges of the 2021 data sets for a whole variety of different things will be difficult. Thank you.
Thanks. The impact on staff and capacity to compile all these is, you know, a concern, obviously, as well, when there's always competing priorities. But thanks, Ian.
Okay. Do we agree the recommendations on that report?
Agreed.
The final thing I would like to say, and it's probably Mr. Lorimer is the only one who knows what I'm going to be talking about, but it's very reminiscent of the old SIPFA rating review that came out every year, which had a whole heap of financial information for each council. But I haven't seen one of these for a long time, and I suspect this national benchmarking overview report will be taking the place of that. But what it does need, it needs people to look at year-on-year variations. And now for a report of that size, that's quite a difficult procedure. And I'm quite sure that officers in their respective specialisations will be looking at these particular situations. I've seen you just flash up there, Mrs. Williamson. Margot, would you like to come on that?
No, didn't mean to interrupt at all. Sorry, Councillor King.
That's quite all right. Right, and one final thing, for those officers on Zoom who don't know how to raise their hand, you have to go into participants and you will get a white panel on the right-hand side of the screen, and at the bottom of that, you've got your raise your hand. Okay, if there's nothing else, thank you very much, everybody. We've just about taken up all the time available to us, but we'll now close the meeting.